Very pleased not be joined here at Blogging the Boys by a great friend of BTB, the one and only. He is set to play James Bond in the newest installment of the 007 franchise, as I've been told. From FTN Fantasy, it is Aaron Schatz. Aaron, thank you for taking the time to join us. How are things going playing James?
I think I'm a little too American for Bond, dude.
I mean, I feel like we're due for one. You know what I mean? Like, that's a silly rule.
Woody Allen playing little Jimmy Bond in Casino Royale back in the late 60s. That's more my type. I'm doing all right. Just rocking the off season. We're working on the book, the preseason book, and just getting a lot of work done.
There is no resource on the internet for football knowledge in every capacity, even beyond football knowledge now at FTN Fantasy. I know you guys are dabbling in golf, PGA Championship behind us. So
that's the nice thing about being with a larger company now is that we do other sports. I don't do other sports, but there are people who know a lot about golf and basketball and baseball and tennis and other things. So yeah, FTN has a bunch of gambling and fantasy advice for a number of different sports. Yeah.
I have a lot of Dallas Cowboys questions, obviously, but I'm curious if you had to start from scratch in a different sport, what would it be? What calls you from a analytical perspective?
Nothing.
Wow.
Honestly, my sports were baseball and football, and there were 100 people doing baseball when I started, and nobody doing football. So I was like, let's do something unique. So I mean, if I got started now, football is my main passion. So yeah, I'm not into that many other sports. I watch a little bit of basketball.
Okay, that's a good answer. As somebody who is so analytically driven, I imagine that you're probably that way in a lot of elements of life, a lot of aspects of life. How silly is it that the only conversation around the Dallas Cowboys that I'm sure you've seen, or at least a lot of it, has been the all-in stuff? Like it is the fluffiest Dallas Cowboy-iest thing that I've ever seen. And I obviously have an incredible pulse on or at least I like to think I do. That has to be really annoying as somebody who likes to live in such a finite, measurable world.
Yeah, okay. So on one hand, the fact is that veteran free agents do not move the needle as much as people think they do. They do not move the needle as much as the number of words that we devote to the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
In part because we need something to write about other than the draft.
Right.
So we know we will write about it and people will give it eyeballs, but the fact is it doesn't move the needle as much as people think it does. On the other hand, this team does have a couple of legit holes, and the real issue is the contracts, especially Dak Prescott. It's not how many free agents did they sign this offseason and whether they're going all in or not. It's what on earth is happening after this season with the contracts. That's the issue.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and certainly a perspective I share. And if you have followed the Dallas Cowboys for some time, you are very used to how they operate, whether you agree with it or not. That part of how everything has gone shouldn't be surprising, but the contractual thing is silly. I mean, it really is. If you're determined to keep Dak or CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons, because those are the main three, then 100% of history tells us that getting these deals, which are cornerstone franchise market-setting deals done as soon as possible, is the cheapest way to go. There is, I would challenge you or anybody to find the example that counters that methodology.
We can have an interesting conversation about Dak Prescott. And do you believe that his struggles in the playoffs represent something real, or do you believe that they just represent random variation? And he just happens to have rolled snake eyes a couple of times in really important situations, and that's not a real thing. I can't see a world where they don't want to sign Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb long term. So what are they waiting for?
I think that's all really well said. And I think the snake eyes thing is applicable to them as a team, right? Because they've been a very, metric and
they've been great in the regular season every year. There's no question, yes, the playoff losses are disconcerting, right? A couple of them were close. Last year was very not close, okay? And so, I mean, do you believe that Prescott has some sort of negative magic power that makes him unable to concentrate in the playoffs unless they're playing Tampa? I'm a great believer that players that have struggled in the playoffs historically struggle in the playoffs until the year they don't.
Right.
And that is right. There's a number of teams right now trying to get over that hump, right? The Cowboys are trying to get over that hump. The Bills are trying to get over that hump. If you think about winning the Super Bowl as the hump, the Bengals are trying to get over the hump, and the 49ers are trying to get over the hump. And the Cowboys are going to find it easier to get over that hump than the Bills will because they don't happen to share a conference with Patrick Mahomes.
Right. And to your point, there are different humps, so to speak, that, exist. Like the Bengals have a different one that has been, moved for them, obviously, over the course of the Joe Burrow era. It is interesting to think about because it people talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I talked about golf betting. Last week was the PGA Championship. I don't know if you followed that at all, but Xander Schauffele won. He's a very good golfer, and it's his first major championship. And every data assessment, probability, whatever you want to pick out, picked him as a heavy favorite and has picked him in these major championships. And he had withered and withered and withered. And to your point, or maybe the collective point, he had just kind of come up short in those moments, but he'd been this incredible golfer playing in these other tournaments that aren't, as heavy or soaking wet from a narrative standpoint. And that could just be Dak. That could just be the team. That could be CD. That could be Michael, whatever the case may be. Which, again, back to the point is, even if that is the case, is it not worth spending the money to get to that point and hope that maybe luck does smile upon you, even if it is?
I think luck. So, yes.
Right.
I think Dak Prescott is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, and you got to give him the money. You do not want to go back out there and have to get a quarterback.
Right.
You do not want to go back onto the market trying to find a quarterback because you either end up with a 36-year-old guy coming off a torn Achilles or playing rookie roulette.
Or both at the same time.
Or both at the same time, apparently. Yeah. But again, I don't see a world where they don't want to sign Parsons and Lamb. So I don't understand why those deals haven't happened. Like those are even more of a mystery to me than the Prescott deal.
That has been the big mega conversation surrounding the Cowboys for months now. And, we've explained why. Something that I feel like hasn't been talked about a ton. We've obviously discussed Dan Quinn leaving, his departure. He'd kind of worn thin on me personally throughout the halfway point of the season, but that's water under the bridge at this point in time. If I rewound the clock for you, Aaron, after the 2021 season, anything I said was there's no way the Cowboys are going to have as many turnovers this year in 2022. There's just no way. It's impossible. There's 100 years of history that proves this. And that was proven to be correct and true in the matter of Trayvon Diggs. He obviously did not have the season he had, but they have defied odds. And
yes.
Not even odds. They have defied the tidal wave of history, not just 1 year, but 2 years in a row. I feel like there is a bottom coming out that is at least due historically for this defense. I don't know if you agree, though. I went back
and looked. There are four teams since 2000 that have ranked in the top 5 in takeaways per drive for 3 straight years. The Tampa Bay Bucks from 2000 to 2002.
Well, that makes sense.
The Patriots from 2010 to 2012, and then again from 2019 to 2021. And the Cowboys the last 3 years. Now, what happens to these teams? One of those Patriots teams and the Bucks in the 4th year were 6th. So they had another good year.
Okay.
Before they kind of returned to average. Mm-hmm. The other Patriots team was 13th.
Interesting. So which was the Patriots team that held, or do you know offhand?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Of the 2 Patriots groups, which one fell to 6th in the 4th year?
2019 to 2021.
Okay.
6th in 2020.
And then everything kind of fell off of the Patriots in an overall sense. Okay, that makes sense.
After that. So, I mean, is it more likely than not that the Cowboys are not going to be a top 3 takeaway defense? Yeah, but I think they're still likely to be an above average takeaways defense.
Interesting.
But yeah, they're not as likely to be as good on defense. That's the bad news. The good news is that I think the gap between the Cowboys and the Eagles is bigger than people want to write off the last 6 or 7 weeks of the Eagles season as if it doesn't matter. And they're going to come back to what they were. First of all, what they were in the first 10 weeks of the season was not as good as their record. But second of all, research shows that second half performance does not roll over to the next year as a trend in general.
not
but also
necessarily
you
way to
don't ignore it.
DVOA,
You also
but
don't ignore the second half as if
right,
it didn't happen, right? Like
sure.
both the first half and second half of the season have to be considered. And if you consider both of those halves, the Eagles were a slightly better than average team. I mean, like not the gap between them and the Cowboys is bigger than I think people give it credit.
You're saying in a positive sense for the
In a
Cowboys.
positive sense for Cowboys fans.
That's interesting because so they were 10-1, the Eagles were, and there was all these just incredibly. I hate to dilute things and to call them lucky and fluky because there is skill involved to some degree.
Right. There was a lot of close wins that were somewhat unsustainable.
Right, but the losses.
Unsustainable is a better word.
Thank you. But the losses that they incurred over the second half of the season, those were not of the same,
Right. They weren't losing by 3 in the last minute.
Right? Exactly. And so, whereas, I mean, the Cowboys were the same team throughout all of the regular season. And I know that all the people are like, the regular season doesn't matter. But, I mean, it does matter to some significant degree, obviously not to the same.
Because if you don't do good in it, you don't make the playoffs. And then you don't get a chance to win in the playoffs.
And so, to that point, I'm sure you have enough data to suggest and to prove that the NFC South is the division you want to play, right? If you're an NFL team these days.
Yes, the NFC South sucks. That's correct.
So, thank you. I'm
higher on the Saints. I'll give a little bit of preview of the book. I'm higher on the Saints than anybody else. As far as I'm concerned, the Saints are miserably mediocre and boring, which is way better than people think they are.
Well,
people think the Saints are horrible. And in reality, they're there.
Well, I mean, they exist, but they've existed for
you have to actively to be bad. You have to actively be bad. They're not.
Right.
They're not bad. Their quarterback is very average.
Their hump is just like 2 humps back. You know what I mean? And so, but they're still in line.
They're
you know
just
what I mean?
Boring and average. They're just, but in the NFC South, boring and average may win you the division.
I think it was 2 years ago, and I don't mean this as an insult to him at all, but when Peter King predicted them to be the 1 seed in the NFC, and that was a little whoa.
Yeah. Was that after Breeze was gone?
It was like 2 years ago, and but the only defense I could offer was their division is terrible, right? Like you could see a world where they stack up.
Yeah, they have the second easiest projected schedule.
Right. So, but as far as the Cowboys are concerned, you have the NFC South, so that's 4, winnable games.
Yes.
You have the Texans, and I'm very high on the Texans, as I know a lot of people are. But the Texans had kind of a not necessarily sustainable.
High on the Texans. I'm high.
Right.
Getting guys back from injury on top of everything.
Totally, but that also applies. I don't mean to but the Cowboys. But Trayvon Diggs coming back from injury.
DeMarvin. No, but I'm talking about just if you're looking at their schedule, you can't
right.
be the Texans are a team that was good and should be better.
Where would you, and maybe what is your model and a preview for the book? Where do you rank the Cowboys in a general sense in the NFC? If you believe them to be the best
in the NFC, second or third.
So it's San Francisco and then maybe Detroit is kind of the coin flip, maybe?
Yeah, I think we have Detroit ahead of Dallas. I can't quite remember.
That's interesting. I mean, it's this weird juxtaposition, Aaron, and I'm certain you can understand where you can talk yourself into this team in a lot of ways because Dak is very good and the defense won't fall off of a cliff historically, at least, but will be very good.
It's possible that they'll fall off of a cliff.
But
it's not likely. This is a team that's been really good in the regular season for years. So there's really no major reason to believe that they will not again this year be that way.
I know this is a stupid question, so apologies, but if you had to give credit to somebody, who would you give it to? Because there's a sector of people that don't want to give it to anybody, right? And Jerry Jones, nobody wants to give him any football credit. This isn't a defense of that, but Mike McCarthy gets very little football credit, and some of that is just what comes with the dinner of the position that he holds. Obviously, Dak Prescott is an incredibly polarizing person. I mean, based on your measurements and calculations.
I think Dak Prescott is better than people give him credit for, and I think Stephen Jones, if some reports are be correct, he's the one who's more making some of the lesser decisions in the front office that are bringing them good players, not necessarily the highest profile players.
Yeah, the last few years they've hit on the J-Run curses and the Dante Fowlers, these bargain bin. You could put Eric Kendricks in that box. I suppose you could put Zeke Elliott in that box.
And Quinn. So right. Losing Quinn is a problem.
That's fair. That's why I'm so interested in how they'll fare. It was Trayvon Diggs 2 years ago, and it's DeRon Bland this year. There's no way the pick sixes and all that kind of stuff can happen. It's a very interesting dynamic, volatile season that the Cowboys are approaching. But it is nice to hear that the gap is larger with Philadelphia than people would expect.
Yes, and Washington is a lot of unknown. That Washington certainly fits the bill of the team that could suddenly be good.
Right.
They could absolutely be like last year's Houston Texans.
They're a good worst to first candidate,
but they're
I think.
probably not going to be.
Right.
But
not
they
yet.
might be. And if they are, it makes sense.
The book.
Washington goes 11-6 is a sentence that makes much more sense than the New York Giants go 11-6.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could totally
Even
see.
though my projections have the two teams very similar, the upside, if Daniels hits all of a sudden, like very quickly, the upside for the Washington is much, much better.
If Daniels hits, if Philadelphia regresses even further, or the same way that they did, if Dallas regresses, the division plays the NFC South. And you could very easily, I think, see a world where they're this year's Texans. They're the worst of first team, among
you can't
others.
predict that rookie quarterbacks will be good, but
true.
Sometimes they are.
The book, everything you do is important and incredible and provides a wide wealth of knowledge and information. But the book is such a great way to kind of get started. Give us all the details that we need to know, please, Aaron.
Coming out mid-July, it's the FTN Football Almanac 2024. I don't have a page to point you to yet. We haven't designed the cover yet. My guess is it's going to have Travis Kelce on the cover because we had Mahomes on the cover last year, and the tradition is we do the cover in the photo of the Super Bowl champion, and so who else to do, right? I mean, who's more appropriate to represent the 2023 season? So we've got about 10 or 11 chapter essays that have been finished, and people are working on the unit comments for front sevens and secondaries, and player comments and projections are done by Jeff Ratcliffe from FTN. So yeah, it's full speed ahead on that baby.
It is interesting that Travis Kelce had a bigger Super Bowl win than he did last year when it was against his brother with his mom. You know what I mean? If you had told me a year ago that he would have a louder and more emphatic Super Bowl run, it would have felt impossible. But obviously, it happened. Is the book, I don't want to speak for you, but the thing you're most proud of over the course of an entire season, just because of how much work goes into it? It's a Bible of sorts.
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot of people doing a lot of good work.
Interesting.
A lot of good writers. It's great to give opportunities to some of my old writers that we don't necessarily have room for on the site. I don't actually write that much for the book. I'm mostly in charge of the projections and the editing. So my voice kind of ends up throughout the book in the edits.
I mean, that's a big thing to edit.
Good writers from, Mike Tanier and Brian Knowles and Dan Pizzuta and Cale Clinton and some of the FTN people like Scott Spratt, Tyler Lochner, Alex Blickel. So speaking of our golf experts. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of the book.
Once upon a time, the NFL stats and information book used to be this like incredible thing that would come out every year, but you all have replaced that in my life, at least.
Well, our book is funnier.
It is, of course it is. And I bet there's a lot of people, I think about this all the time, that read it on a beach. Like, I bet you're a great, like, we're going here for the last trip of the summer.
If you can do the PDF, and I wouldn't want to bring the whole thing on the beach, but if you put the PDF in the electronic, like Kindle or something, yeah, I bet it's pretty good. The chapters are nice and digestible,
Not just football knowledge, vacation tips and beach knowledge, apparently, Aaron.
Well, as I always talk about, our book is great for killing mosquitoes. That's because it's nice and thick.
And holding papers down on a desk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, Aaron, you are incredible, and I can't believe you made me feel better about the Cowboys. I didn't think that was going to be a result of today, but
I feel like it's just going to be the same season they've had the last 3 years. Unfortunately, if the 49ers are as good as we think they are, it's going to be the same season that they've had the last few years.
That's disappointing, but
again, like you said, you don't get to lose in the playoffs unless you get to the playoffs.
Right.
And I can't think of another team in the NFC other than Detroit and San Francisco that's more likely to get to the playoffs.
And I mean, you could get hot. I mean, history is
get hot, and this could be the year that Barry Bonds struggled in the playoffs until the year he didn't, and Peyton Manning struggled in the playoffs until the year he didn't, and this could be the year that it works out for them. So.
Xander Schauffele at the PGA Championship, which are very well familiar.
Again, I would rather be a Dallas fan right now than a Philly fan or a Giants fan. Washington's a little bit of a different story because you have that infinite hope for the future that comes with the number 2 overall quarterback. But I mean,
And there's the unique new beginning. It's a very
of
different
the new ownership
right,
and all
exactly.
that. Yeah, it's a good time to be a Washington.
No, that's well said. Okay,
yeah,
well, Aaron,
the Cowboys, despite a couple holes like the third receiver and depending on how Zimmer wants to play things, either third safety or second linebacker is the hole, right?
I hope it's second linebacker. I think we all do.
It's yeah, because they have the people that they have to possibly play second linebacker, Clark and Overshone, are better prospects than the possible third safeties if they don't re-sign Jaron Kearse.
Exactly.
No one played dime. I screwed up a little bit in the ESPN article I did about the biggest remaining hole on every team because I forgot the fact that the Cowboys had hired Zimmer. So they're not likely to play dime like they did last year, where Quinn was playing dime at like 70% of the time or something. So they don't necessarily need the third safety as much as I thought they did, but it would still be a nice thing to have, and they don't really have one.
No, I think that the playoff loss to Green Bay and the 12 personnel that the Packers just kind of unloaded on them over and over and over again made them feel like
that's what everybody's going to do to them.
Exactly. So here's hoping that Eric Kendricks is a helpful solution in that respect. And,
right, but that's one linebacker. You need two.
Well, and they're banking on Overshone, taking a leap, having never played in the NFL, blah blah blah. But it all
I don't know if you didn't play your rookie year. Does it count as a leap? It's you're not really leaping because you didn't have any bad performance to leap from. He's leaping from not playing.
He's DeMarvin Overshone. He's not wearing number 0 like he did at Texas. That's the biggest crime of all things.
Was someone 0 for the Cowboys?
They have not had a 0 yet. Since
I wonder if it's one of those organizational things like Belichick. Belichick didn't want to let anybody wear 0 last year. So Christian Gonzalez had to wear number 6 as a rookie, and then he switched to 0 in his second year because Gerard Mayo doesn't care. I wonder if the same thing's going on with the Cowboys, because that would be fun if Overshone wore 0.
He wore it at Texas, and that was his thing, like Agent 0, Overshone. This is my true last one, because you're a football purist the way I am. I hate the world that we live in, where Christian Gonzalez can wear number 6. That's stupid. It shouldn't be a thing. I don't like it at all.
I would like to go back to the old number system. Yes, I liked it when you knew that from a number you knew what position a guy played.
That's well said.
I'm an old fogey. I disagree with Tom Brady, who said it was harder to identify linebackers now that they could wear whatever number because, dude, you went to college.
Yeah, I mean, like that was a weird perspective on it.
Anybody could wear any number they wanted, so it wasn't so you just think like you're 21 again. But
exactly, my biggest gripe.
Fogey who does stats, I miss it that you knew that if a guy was 7, that was a quarterback or a punter,
right? Or a kicker. My biggest gripe is that now you can have number 1 covering number 1. That's stupid. That shouldn't be a thing. We shouldn't,
Yeah, but again, it has been in college for years, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And guys wearing number 0, they seem to enjoy it. So great.
Aaron Schatz, FTN Fantasy. Looking forward to the book. As soon as there's a link out, we'll blast it all over the place at Blogging the Boys. Thank you so much for the time, and have a great summer.
Sure. Have a good day, man.